Welcome. It has just gone 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Tuesday the 20th of June, and you are watching episode 91 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap, providing insight on the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode, the 2023 Queensland budget, spin or substance, is my guest, Dr. Marcus Smith. Marcus is a leading independent applied economist. He joined us 2 weeks ago to discuss the federal budget and is back to provide his insight regarding the Queensland budget and where it is leading us. With record revenues, we have record spending and seemingly no interest in paying down debt. Is this our road to perdition? Welcome, Marcus.
Good evening, Bill. Great to be back.
It's great to have you back here. Our budget, I mean, we got a lot of spin, especially in the regions in regards to what it delivered for us. But in the long term, what's it really delivering for the people of Queensland, especially when we see the forecast growing debt as the years come by?
Well, it's obviously going to struggle, and you know, I mean, they're talking about the energy revolution and everything, and you know, if we know how important the coal and gas industry is, and you know that at the moment we're seeing a lot of the kickback finally from the Queensland Resources Council, and you know, you've got also, you know, talking about the sovereign debt issues with respect to the royalties, etc. And we've already seen investment in the resources sector start to fall down quite considerably from its levels, and that will continue to do so. You've got, obviously, from the federal, the gas caps and everything, the gas industry aren't happy either. But, you know, a lot of the infrastructure projects, you know, is it large? Well, a lot of it's just re-announced. I mean, there's nothing really new in it, apart from the, you know, what's going to be needed for to go ahead with the games.
But the other thing, I noticed a comment by Steve Andrews, the member from Morani. He did a bit of a comment on the budget for his electorate. And the interesting thing is how slowly some of this money comes out for you know, general capital works. You know, it's over. There might be a $400 million project, but in 1 year they might only give you $20-odd million. You know. So what sort of planning is that? Is that common in regards to all the sort of infrastructure around it? It can be in such small dribs and drabs?
Well, that's exactly what happens. And that's why these projects just tend to be re-announced all the time, because, you know, you get the cost blowouts on top of that as well. And, you know, it's great to announce all these projects, but where are all the construction workers going to come from? I mean, that we're going to have, we're going to be building all these new houses as well. You know, we're going to have to step up on all the new public housing and everything, as far as, you know, the government will tell us they're going to prioritise all of this. So, you know, then who's going to be left to build all of the infrastructure projects? I mean, they think it's a magic pudding. You know, it's just political spin, you know, as we're talking about. You know, it's easy to announce something, but, you know, when it comes down to actually hitting the ground and getting it done, governments are terrible at it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I live in an area that's fairly well developed. It's an old area, but there's the odd pocket of vacant blocks and that have come onto the market. And I just noticed a house around the corner. I think the land was sold about at auction about 3 years ago. I think the building, they first broke the ground about more than 18 months ago, and it's still nowhere near finished. It goes in stages, like they get a bit of, they got the slab done, and then weeks and weeks later there's a few bricks, and then they get to a stage and it sits there for months and months on end, and then eventually it gets a roof on and things like this. It's not what you want if you're a homeowner, because you want to move into that that's fairly well. But I suppose this is the thing that's happening all around in regards to availability of tradespeople. And then the government, he knows that we've got this problem, then it turns around and says, oh, we've got to bring another 400,000 people in. And we're also going to have this $10 billion fund of public housing. So all of a sudden, they're complaining about inflation. Then they come up with all this inflationary stuff and no workers. So what way is it going to go?
Oh, well, I'm getting sick and tired of hearing these politicians say their budget's uninflationary because they've given a few rebates for electricity. The thing is, if they give a rebate for electricity and it saves you $500, what do you reckon that $500 is going to go, especially to low income people? It's going to get spent. So it's not decreasing inflation whatsoever. It's an absolute ridiculous to even say that.
Just before we get on to talk about the budget in general in regards to the slide package you think, I just want to show a page, and this is the one that I've always looked at. I've never looked at the budget or anything. I always look at this one, and although it's late, like it gives you information of the past, but I think it's very relevant. This page is from the Treasury documents, and it basically tells you your income the year before in the 12 months past. And when I first started looking at it, I was always confused. Well, this is your income, but your budget's always 10 or 15 billion dollars more in outgoings. But I gradually figured out that's because the Queensland Treasury doesn't hold the money that comes in for capital grants. So it doesn't appear in the Treasury documents as revenue, but it does come up in the budget as spending revenue. And I presume it's a matter of when that money is released or used, that's when they count it. But I've looked at I started looking at this in about 2017, and the GST and other contributions used to be about $19 billion. It's up to $22 billion. Taxes used to be sitting around about $12 billion, and royalties were around about the 3 or 4 maybe sometimes. And the appropriations revenue, that's the money they take off Ergon, Sunwater, Ports North, and all the other sort of utilities or government bodies. That's always been running at about $6 billion, I think. So last year we ended up with $51 billion worth of revenue, and the last financial year we ended up with 55. But I think you'll show in this budget they're actually spending about $89 billion. So maybe you can touch on the sort of differences between revenue and how they get to spend so much more.
Well, definitely, and the revenue as well as expenses are much higher than that, as you'll see once I get through it, because they're both accrual, as you can see. So just presented in a different way. But I also got the capital spending as well all done for you, and by per capita as well within each of the regions. So we'll be able to have a good look at that.
Maybe they just take a lesson and only spend what they actually receive.
And hold your breath. Okay, so I'll go full screen. Okay, so I'll start off. I read through most of it, and I just thought I'd pick out one of the weasel quotes that I've got way down the end in the budget. So the general government sector, its cash surplus estimated to be, this is on the cash, which the details of the cash aren't in there, aren't in the budget. I looked hard for it, and it's only in accrual terms. But so you can see there, which is 14.48 billion higher on the cash basis. That was forecast at the time of the budget, largely due to an improved operation position. Listen to this. Driven by the prudent management of revenue improvements. They're prudent management, from
does Dick have the same trouble as Chalmers, that they can't mention the word coal?
Well, I guess I gave my grab down the bottom, all that being driven by the royalty tax grab and on the state's coal industry, and there's nothing prudent about implementing the highest coal royalty tax structure in the world on the state's most important economic industry, and in turn creating substantial sovereign risk for prospective investors in that industry. Talk about boiling the golden goose. I mean, just the weasel words are just, I mean, I just sometimes it's like reading a fairy tale, some of these budgets, and they should just stick to the figures and that's it. But
It's like a two-pronged attack on the coal industry because of the things in regards to emissions and all that. They're attacking it that way, and then they're turning around and basically start putting things there that will starve it of investment for new projects as well. So they're sort of having a two-pronged attack on the coal industry.
Oh, certainly. And as he said, he makes no excuses for putting it in. He's pretty proud of himself. But as I said, the investment in the industry is starting to wane away. And you can't have your cake and eat it too. And obviously it's for him, he's not looking for the long term. For him, it's about sticking in as long as he can on the teat, and and then move on when things start to go awry. But
I noticed another thing today in the paper is that the government is a bit riled about the mining. The Resources Council's campaign talking about the royalty levy rates, and the government's now going to spend $1.5 million in a campaign, reminding the people how their regime of taxing the evil coal industry is going to give them benefits.
Well, I'll wait to see that, but I wouldn't expect anything less. So from a bunch of socialists, I mean that's sort of the thing. As I said, my point of view. You just can't keep with killing the golden goose that keeps giving the golden eggs. I mean that's it comes a point, and once that investment starts to slow down. We know that from last time when we looked at it, a couple of episodes ago, when we looked at coal in particular, the production isn't rising at all. It's getting more expensive to dig it out of the ground. Productivity is falling within the industry. So and now with all the new the HR laws that are all coming in. The red tape is just going to strangle the country the way it's going, and all our productive industries. And for Queensland, it's just been very lucky. The other states haven't, but Queensland has just been lucky for the coal industry. WA with the iron ore, but they've really been the thing that's held up the economy over the last few years. In particular. So
yeah, it's Northern Australia actually generating all that foreign revenue.
Certainly. Okay, so first thing that you do when you're looking at the assumptions of the budget, the first thing you have to look at is the assumptions that go into it. So let's have a look at that. Household consumption. So that's obviously they're looking at that's going to drain off quite significantly. So that makes up by far the largest contribution to gross state product as it does for GDP.
Is that a sign of people tightening their belts? Is it?
Definitely, from especially from the interest rate rises. That'll be kicking in, but they're also expecting the economy to start to slow. We already saw that we had at the federal level a negative quarter of gross state product per capita, which is an indicator of our living standards. I think we had a 0.3% increase in GDP overall, but when you take into account population growth over that time, it's actually our living standards are going backwards. And you'll see that New Zealand's already in a per capita recession at the moment as well. So as the voice goes, and Albanese is telling us, New Zealand's is a thing to look at, to aspire to, and we're certainly heading the same way. So anyway, dwelling investment going to fall down, but that's going to start to rise apparently. So, and that will be based on both of these components, but then drop off significantly here. So they're expecting, a bit to be going on this year, but then, start to drop off significantly from 2024-25. Business investment. I can't see, how can you see this sort of happening? Most of it is even not in non-dwelling construction. So what's it going to be in capital expenditures from business with these higher interest rates and buying new buildings? Can you see that happening?
No, not really. People don't do that. I mean,
you can see CapEx falling here, but can you see them going out and buying more buildings? And I don't know.
Maybe it's a sweetheart deal with the CFMEU, and that just keep them in a job. On $200,000 a year for the stop go men and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the thing. I mean, when you're starting to see interest rates rising, you're not going to see business investment growing. So and I think those interest rates will stay a lot stickier than what they forecast here, because you can see here that they're forecasting inflation to be falling, back into target by 24-25. As I said, without a serious recession, I can't sort of see that happening. I think we're sort of heading that way into recession, but whether it's going to be bringing down inflation over that time, I think it's going to be quite sticky, especially with the sort of wage rises that we've become accustomed to over the last 2 years, when they all start to filter through, and the unions just aren't going to stop. So I can't see inflation. I can see it be very sticky over time, and I can see low pushing the interest rates up even further. From what a lot of the banks are forecasting. So most of them are anyway. Employment growth here dipping away to be pretty tepid down there at 1.5%. Over those forecasts. Unemployment rate obviously ticking up as well. So that'll be one to watch. NAB have sort of said pretty shortly, by this time they're thinking about 5%, but we'll sort of see here. The wage price index, it's certainly going to tick up, and we'll see how that goes over time. Importantly though, population growth dying off. I don't know how growth is going to die off to when they're bringing in all this immigration in. Can you see? Can you see it being?
That's Australian birth rates.
No, that takes into account. Yeah.
I was just saying.
Well, no, it's not birth rates. They've been declining.
I don't think that people are rushing out to have too many bubs.
I could see that sort of being high too, and that's the thing, is we're going to bring in more people in with declining, gross state product and population growth, which will be accelerating more than that. You're going to be obviously going to bring the actual gross state product per capita or our living standards down to negative territory.
Oh, well, they always wanted to break the back of the middle class, didn't they?
Yeah. Anyway, so obviously they're forecasting here, obviously the predominantly nearly all of the goods and services, it's all goods. I looked at it the other day, services are very small compared to, even nationally, compared to the export of goods with respect to services. So services is your tourism and international visitors and also business and education, financial services and those sorts of things, but they make a very small proportion of total goods and services exports. Okay, so looking at the general government sector, so I'm not going to look at the other component of government, which is the state-owned utilities, etc. But I will look at where the debt is stuck onto them later on when we get to that. So So taxation revenue here, we can see, you know, we're going to start to see that rise apparently over time. Interest income, well, that's going to stay pretty tepid. GST revenue, it's going to be pretty bumpy. You know, that's the thing when you're looking at this, like, you know, 26, 27 is a long way away. So, you know, that's sort of like a, you know, putting a blindfold on, throwing at the dartboard, you know, so, but, you know, dividends going to rise there. And then we're looking at down here, which is a good one, which we'll go through in a second. A very big boon for royalties, as we saw there. So, in particular, you know, 18.288 there, significant boon for you know, for coal in particular over this year. So revenues there, obviously it's going to be large here, which we'll have a look at, which we'll sort of have a look at that surplus fiscal balance service later on between them, well, net operating balance surplus in particular, which is the difference between revenue and expenses. But that's going to then, you know, to start to slow down significantly, but it's going to still be highly elevated compared to 22, 23. You know, and is coal and gas going to die off, you know, down here? I mean, that's another thing. I can't see that happening in a number of years. So. Okay, so coal, and here's we know $15.3 billion over the year. That's phenomenal. So.
And a lot of that's come from that change in the royalties rate above the general sales price as it moves up from $150 a tonne to 200 and so on. So that's been the major improvement, is that additional levy.
Oh, definitely makes up most of it, for sure. You know, it's as I said, it's been a significant boon for them, you know, making significantly more than what they had forecast. So, you know, you still got gas here, still did relatively well as well out of that. You know, and then you've got these other smaller sort of royalties around other things, so precious metals and other minerals, etc. So then that's where that figure there comes in, and it's going to start to taper off as we see. You'll see this fall down, because the next slide is their forecasts on those gold prices. So there's looked at the chart there, which is your coking coals. So obviously we've had, you know, this great time here. They've been significantly elevated. But then they've got a number of forecasts there where they've sort of seen it coming back down. You know, that's at 200, 150 there, 180 or so. That's still, you know, that's still pretty high compared to, you know, historical times that we've had. You know, particularly this is a bit of a you know, a problem that we had with. You know, we almost lost a lot of resource companies back in 15, 16 there. Even Twiggy Forests, Fortescue was on the ropes, but you know, we seem to have to hold on fairly well there. You know, still expected to be sort of, you know, elevated over the average there, but we'll see how that happens. Also, I've also given you, I didn't put a chart there for the thermal coal. But you know, that's still consistent to be 153, still fairly good. You know, to decline to that at 2/3 before reaching, you know, come back down to 120. But you know, it wasn't long ago it was 80. You know, so you know, that's still going to be quite a good
Still
price.
healthy.
Oh, definitely. You know, it's definitely a good outlook there for prices. You know, it's just going to be a matter of getting the investments up. I mean, it's not like we've got a shortage of projects in the pipeline. It's just getting them up. There's just too much red and green tape and
black.
it's just too hard to do business in Australia and to invest in it, unless you're doing, wind farms or solar panel farms or wind turbines farms, that seems to be the only thing that, is in favour. So
They only operate on subsidies and confidential feed-in tariffs that we don't know about.
Definitely. And who pays for the subsidies? Oh, the irony.
That's one thing businesses have learnt over the last 10 or 12 years, I suppose, is how to milk the government in every way you can to get some grant or subsidy or whatever. I mean, it's just playing like in regional areas and that to get someone to come and set up a project there. I mean, the local councils trip over themselves to sort of give them a free period of no rates or whatever, or no provision for infrastructure charges or anything like that. They have learned pretty well how to milk all levels of government.
Oh, well, I mean, that's the thing, because they're competing, they have to put the sweeteners in, and all regions are competing for it, and states as well. So, have a look at when we got Virgin to Queensland. I mean, we had to put in a lot of, of perks and entices there to get them to set up in Queensland. So, I guess that's just the nature of the beast. So, and tonnages here. So we looked at them. They were pretty flat. We looked at those a couple of weeks ago and everything. But they're expecting the tonnages to rise. Not if you're not going to get some more projects up there, not. So the investment that I'm looking at has been falling, especially foreign investment in our mining sector. So how are we going to get more production, especially when existing mines are having to? It's more expensive, and having to dig deeper. And how is it going to rise?
But the thing is, the sovereign risk that they're created by this new royalty scheme, although it sort of, in general, currently attacks the coal industry, there's nothing to say that there's confidence in other investors investing in other minerals might be somewhat spooked by the fact that a government, usually as steady as Australia, comes up and sort of is willing to change the goalposts. So it could affect, say, if you could, in the future, you might be interested in a lithium mine or something like that. There's sovereign risk there that you expect that you're getting from the coal could be transferred to the instability in other metals as well.
Well, you're looking at lithium; they're all in the WA, so it's interesting you brought that up. There's one in NT, but they're nearly all predominantly all of them, except for that one, are in WA. And look what's been going on this week with the thing that's going to be passed on the cultural heritage legislation that over a normal quarter
acre block. If you get you can't turn
any dirt on it without
you can't turn 5 kilos of dirt over on your own block. I mean, give us a break. But anyway,
that's going to do to investment. Oh my God, I don't know, mate. Who is running the show? Anyway, well, let's keep going.
Well, actually, the people who are running the show, no one owns up to voting for them.
That's right. Said it true. Okay, so we looked at the revenue, and and I think we've sort of, if you've been following the media, some of them are picked up because the state government also put out a biannual public service where you can look at all the number of people employed along each of the departments and in which capacity they're employed and everything. And from what some of them were saying, there were more people employed as marketers in the Prime Minister and Cabinet, Queensland Prime Minister and Cabinet, and Palaszczuk's department than what the increase has been greater than what there has been in police over the years. So, I mean, it's becoming a big issue, but especially her department.
Just testing me on my memory a bit. I think think the figures were that prior to the last budget, she had 516 that had gone up to 550 or 60 odd, and they were expecting to put on another 74 in her department in the next 12 months.
Yeah.
That's, does premier's area, like, need 500 or 600 people? Like, you only got 2 ears and you only got one brain to take in information. How many people do you need chatting at you?
Well, if you had a premier that was a bit more clever, you wouldn't need as many people around you, would you? Because you'd sort of you'd be a bit more clever and be a bit more across everything, a bit more common sense. But
on those employees' expenses, does that factor in the amount of money that's going into super? So it's not just wages; it also takes account of super being put in place where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, super's down here. So you've got a super here which goes on top of it. So that goes on top of that.
Oh, so it is.
Yeah, other.
So that's what the taxpayer's up for. Yeah.
Yeah. You have to combine those, definitely. So it's sitting at 40, over 40% of the revenue. So around abouts. It's been sitting about 37 to 40. For a few years that I've been looking at it, in so much detail. So,
do you have any general idea how that fares with sort of other countries, sort of as their ratio of public service bill versus the rest of their revenues? Is Australia abnormally high, or is it sort of just run of the mill?
Well, it's a good question. I haven't done it myself. I have seen some papers written on it, but I haven't taken a lot of it in. I'd have to look it up. But I know OPA's done some stuff, and I think seen some stuff in the Courier Mail as well. Probably Dan Petrie, I think, wrote a little bit about it at some stage as well. So so those figures are out, but I'm not really worried about the rest of the world. I'm really worried about what's going on here.
Well,
we're a different type of welfare state.
Yeah, it's a big chunk of the overall revenue and expenditure. I would expect somewhere in there's a bit of fat.
No, of course there is. Far too much. And when you're looking at 26 million people getting run, getting governed by three levels of government, the duplication and everything is phenomenal. Australia just doesn't need that level of government. It's simple as that. Okay, so I thought I'd just throw in a little chart here for those that don't like the sort of numbers and sort of like the pictures. It sort of gives you a breakdown here across the different different purposes or functions of the government there. So predominantly most of it's in health, as you imagine, also education.
I don't see a slice of the pie for wealth creation projects and infrastructure.
No, well, they're separate, so they're not in expenses. They're actually in, and we'll go through those. I'll look at capital outlays quite shortly. So, okay, so let's move on to, obviously they're the actual the operating expenses, and here's the other part, which is the government spending on capital infrastructure. So I'll start off with the larger pie graph there to look at the bigger picture. So predominantly most of it's in transport there. Then
Cross River Rail.
Significant amount, yeah. Well, not an insignificant amount. It's energy infrastructure.
But the energy infrastructure is for garbage, unreliables, and pumped hydro, which requires at least 20 to 30% more energy in than it ever produces. So it's not really a good investment.
No, No, well, we'll see down the road because you know, I think the wheels are starting to fall off, and you know, we'll see how it all pans out. So it's no
I
use
probably, I
continually
think probably,
talking about it because we'll just wait till the wheels fall off, because
I
they
think
will.
the first signal may come from Germany in the next few years at the polls. I think you can con people along so far in regards to this is going to all improve in that, but when they find out or experience money going away from their pocket and harder to live, maybe then the polls turn around and sort of change direction.
When even Trudeau comes out, you know, from Canada, he's fairly on the left, but even he's turned around and said, "No, this is going too quick. You know, we're not ready for this. We're going to have to slow down." But anyway, we'll see how that goes. So I've broken it down. Then that's sort of where they're all spent and everything. So I'm not going to go through every project for every region, you know, but what I have done, here's the actual outlays themselves. Okay. But so we're looking at 16, you know, 0.4 billion over the, you know, over the next year.
But a lot of these things are just housekeeping. I mean, you've got to build a school when the population grows up. You've got to renovate schools when they start to fall down, and so a lot of this is not like full-blown new investment, is it?
No, definitely not. And a lot of it's, you know, for the depreciation, like upkeep and everything. It's not just, you know, keeping up with, you know, with new infrastructure like hospitals and schools, but it's also, you know, repairing and maintaining the assets that they've got. You know, so
the other thing is too, a lot of this, like they blow the trumpet, they're doing this, and this, and spending this money, but amongst that money is actually money from the Commonwealth that's been slotted in there as well, isn't it? It's not just state. It's not just the state. Like the good old Queensland government has worked all this out and saved all this money, and it's got to spend this. A lot of this is, well, half of it might even be Commonwealth money.
Well, they'll be contributing to projects with them, because a lot of that'll be the tied grants that'll be in with the GST, which they'll sort of, you know, which can be separate to what states are paid. You know, it just depends on the agreements at the time when they do it. But you know, it's large, but if you go back to, you know, to a few decades ago and you have a look at how significant the capital spend was as a proportion of revenue, you know, today they spend a very small portion of revenue compared to what they used to on actual.
Well, I suppose the other thing is if you need so much money for administrating the government, well, then there's got to be less money for other things.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. It's no magic pudding. So that doesn't really tell us a lot. So what I did is I broke it down per capita. So you can start to see then, you know, I know the North likes to say, you know, we don't get what we, you know, what we should. But so here's, I've broken it down by, this is the statistical area 4, so SA4 regions. So these aren't your LGAs, these are your broader regions.
Yep.
Okay. So as they're broken up there, so Greater Brisbane, you know, out of that, you know, out of that component that we looked at,
Does reasonably well.
Yeah, well, definitely.
Well, people complain about, well, you know, it's only a small amount per capita, but the thing is, when you've got an area, say you've got an established area that's got 30 or 40,000 people in it, in an electorate or whatever, you are getting a lot of benefit from a little spend, if you know what I mean. If you spend a couple of $1 million, well, then a lot of people get it on a road somewhere in there. A lot of people get a benefit. But if you spend $1 million on a road in the regions, like you need it to connect, but it doesn't really benefit, but it's essential. So
definitely,
So
and it's a lot more, decentralized in the regions as well. So obviously, it's going to, cost a lot more to in capital investment as well as spending.
well, this is a lot of times when we argue for a separate northern Queensland state. The government rolls out people like Paul Williams and they beat us around the head. Well, you get more per capita and all this sort of thing. But the other thing they don't forget to mention, well, the fact is the Commonwealth provides money, more than $1 billion, on the fact that, yes, it's costs more to deliver the service, so the government actually gets a fair bit of money in regards to cover those expenses, and so it's got to go to the regions. The other thing is the Indigenous. There's another grant within the Grants Commission for Indigenous people, and that's almost another $1 billion that comes to the Queensland state government. And so that money, right, has to go out to the regions because it's there for a specific purpose. And the other thing, I take exception with a lot of these things in regards. You've got Wide Bay there, they're going to spend $5,000 per person. That's because they buggered up the Paradise Dam when they built it.
That's what it is.
Now they've got to spend nearly $1 billion to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
That in no way is going to benefit the majority of people in that region. It's not going to improve their service. They're just paying for something they buggered up years ago, and they've picked the most expensive way to repair it. It's just beyond belief. And if you take the Central Queensland, $7,000 per person, that is on the basis of the bullshit pumped hydro scheme that they're planning to put in there. And there's two of them.
Yeah, there's two of them, isn't there?
River, and there's another one further south. That's not going to give one ounce of good for the people in those areas. It's to satisfy the green idiots in southeast Queensland.
No, it certainly is. It certainly is, and
they think we're fools.
Oh, they do, but I mean, that's the thing too, because they're up against it in around the state seats around inner Brisbane, where all the elites live. So they have to be seen that they're green and good, and it's renewables all the way, so. But certainly, as you pointed out, that's Wide Bay and Central Queensland. Those projects that Paradise Dam and the two hydro projects are predominantly what's driven that. So,
and like I say, that is not going to give one bit of benefit to either anyone in Central and North Queensland. That's all to satisfy those.
Well, it's not going to grow the pie, is it? Not going to produce anything.
and they're dud projects anyway. I mean, pumped hydro. I mean, if anyone looks at pumped hydro, you've got two ponds, one's full, one's empty. There's no amenity for them. You can't swim or boat or anything on either. You can't fish because there's no fish life. And if one's full, the other one empty, so it's just a big mud flat. There's no life around it. I mean, I can't understand why the environmentalists aren't up in arms about these sort of things, but they're the idiots who back these projects.
Well, I mean, why aren't they up in arms about all the damage that's been done by solar panels and wind turbines? I mean, seriously. And considering all the mining, the additional mining that needs to be done, the ore that needs to be dug out of the ground for their fancy pendangle, new rare earths, which, as we said, it's not that they're rare in the essence that they're scarce in the world. It's just that, when you dig out a whole heap of ore, they're very rare within the ore because there's a very small proportion of them within the ore. So, I mean,
Anyway, I'm sidetracking you. We
better move on. We could go on about that all day, couldn't we? It's not like they understand mining or agriculture or production, is it? It's sitting in their windowless offices in cities and that. So anyway, but as always, it's Brisbane West always gets it's always the worst out of out of the lot. It's got a relatively small population there, and it's pretty sort of leafy and
I suppose it's pretty well established, and they don't want any more people in there.
No, it's a very it's very conservative. It's actually gone green recently, so it's a bit of a worry. But you know, they're always got the lowest per capita for, you know, for a long time. So there's also grants given then to local councils by the state government as well as the NGOs. You know, so as I said, I've given you they're the absolute sort of numbers, and I've broken those up as well into per capita terms. You know, so you can sort of see there, you know, predominantly the inner city Brisbane has received a significant amount there, but also Cairns.
You'd upset him in the Darling Downs, wouldn't you?
Yeah, yeah.
Moreton
Bay North cops it as well, so it is on Brisbane West, so it doesn't get much either.
I suppose Toowoomba might whinge, but they had a pretty good run with the connector and all the other infrastructure
and the bypass, yeah, and the bypass there,
yeah,
so
the bypass as well.
yeah, yeah.
You got to have swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so you throw that in there, and that, you know, that forms part of that, you know, that on top of the capital expenditures. So I'll let you share them. I can share them with you, and you can put them on the slides for anyone else who wants to go through in detail. Okay, so where's that give us? Okay, so that brings us right down to the aggregates. So here we've gone through, we found our revenues here, and our expenses. And here we've seen obviously that net operating balance here. Okay, has you know, it's particularly high here from the thanks to the coal industry.
One of
yeah. You know, so obviously this is bigger than the cash, you know, the cash balance surplus, but because this is in accrual terms, obviously, being revenue and expenses. You know, and once you take into account the capital outlays, which is the you know, the purchase of non-financial assets, which is your capital outlays, in other words. So you know, you detract from that, and then that gives you your fiscal balance overall here. So you know, it's still fairly healthy there at 6.7, but then, you know, as we move forward, you know, yeah, she starts to go down again. And the big build, there is the big build. So, and this is in you know, in net terms. So this isn't you know, then they're talking about the you know, well, this is the 40 billion or so, the big build. That's it there. Okay, so that will give you a fiscal balance. And so, you know, obviously here where we've got a negative fiscal balance, that means that the government actually has to borrow. That's essentially what that means. You know, and so borrowing starts to dish up, even though we've been able to pay, you know, a little bit back off here, you know, for the borrowing.
More borrowings at a time when the interest rates go up.
But this is yeah, but I'll see there's a bit of a tricky because obviously the yeah, well I'll show you in a second, because there's two components of the state government's debt. There's, you know, there's this component here of general government, and then there's the component that's actually, you know, put on to the state-owned utilities, etc., state-owned assets. But net debt, there's, you know, this is the general government sector only. Okay, so it'll start to come down here, but then it starts to increase.
Lots.
And this is where we can start to see what goes on with the actual debt. So here's our borrowings all up. Okay, there's your general sector. Okay, so this isn't net. So if we go back here, okay, that'll be your net, you know, your borrowings there. But if we come to here, okay, you'll start to see here, and then you'll start to see the borrowings here on the non-financial public sector borrowings. So that's on the utilities, etc. Okay, so when we talk about debt, this is what we have to look at. It's not this general government, it's this, because
Both.
yes, it's both. Okay, so and when we start to see, we're going to start to see that tick up.
Is this because with the non-financial public sector borrowings, is that because the government's adding more to it, or is that just going to be their natural growth?
Well, I'd imagine it'd be the natural growth, but also, what they decide to stick on the
Rip
book.
off this dividend.
So,
I mean, I remember places like Ports North and that, and our Cairns Airport, they had surpluses in that, and then I'm not sure whether it was BD government or Bligh government turned around and threw all this debt onto Ergon and Ports North and that. So, and the thing is, even if they look like having operating profits and that, the government doesn't hesitate to rip more off in dividend and leave them in a situation where they're actually got to go and borrow more money, even though they've made a reasonable profit.
Yeah, well, I mean, this thing, this is what we're sort of sitting with, and and if the coal industry goes down, I mean, and these our coal power plants become essentially stranded assets. They're going to be stuck with all this debt, and you won't be able to sell them, will you?
No, well, Ergon would be a big contributor to that non-financial public sector borrowings. They would hold a fair bit of debt, I'd expect, compared to other things like Sunwater and the ports and things like that.
Yeah, well, you'd have to go right into the details of the budget to sort of find that, But
if you kill the coal industry and you kill generation, well, then they've got no capacity to repay it.
No, certainly.
And the taxpayers got to pick it up.
They'll become just stranded assets.
But it's still, the liability still rests on the taxpayer.
Oh, definitely. So, that's why it's total public sector debt. And this isn't including the council debts and everything as well. So, when you're looking at total.
What do you think?
The ABS put both of those together. So,
why do you think the governments have found it so acceptable to run big debts or continue to grow debts? Where, I mean, if you go back a generation or so, there was, it was hardly any debt. Well, I don't know how much there was, but it didn't seem to be this proportion, or governments weren't prepared to be this far in debt.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of especially over the recent years, there's a lot that will argue that inflation will essentially take the value out of the debt anyway as it goes forward. But there's also the essentially where they're going to do it. They argue that we need to invest, and if we invest, we'll earn more revenue from it. But do you think they make a lot of money out of their investment?
So tell me what do they invest in that actually grows the pie or actually makes money? I don't know much. I haven't seen too many projects that bring in the dollars for the coffers. Most of it's sort of like, if you build a cross river rail, it costs you $5 billion to start with. By the time it's finished, it costs you $12 billion, but it will never generate a dollar for the treasury. It will always be outgoings on maintenance and subsidising the people who actually use the rail system.
Yeah, certainly. And a lot of this as well, left over, from the sort of the COVID sort of debacle and everything. A lot of that's been generated from that, but also there was the RBA, telling state governments to borrow more and at such low interest rates, and a lot of the academics and the left wing.
Yeah, but if you borrow money, the idea is to actually make money from it.
Borrow for the sake of it.
If a person and a family decides to go and borrow money for an investment, they want to. they want a greater return than the cost of the investment and that back. But I don't know of any investments that the government's making that has some sort of wonderful return.
No, definitely. And remember, the higher the actual debt here, with the interest rates rising, going to be the higher the interest payments, which then just, if they don't generate the revenue increase to make that up, then it's just going to become more debt. So a lot of that's going to be the growing debt. So it's I mean. We're talking about debt constraint, but as you can see, we maybe thanks to the boom in coal, we've been able to put a bit on here, but she's going to start to rise pretty significantly after in the next 20 billion a year, over the next year and going out. That's going to be significant, but you're heading into the Olympic Games as well, so obviously they're going to be planning on going to be spending a lot to get all that ready on time and everything. So we're going to start to see that go, and how much we'll actually get out of the Commonwealth Games. Not a lot of countries have ever benefited from it, so we'll see how it goes. So if for those that sort of instead of the numbers, like to see a chart on the picture, okay, you can start to see that sort of kicking up there. So and this is net debt, and that's only general government sector net debt. Okay, once you take into account the earnings from the state government's investments, Treasury, Corporation. So you've got here the general government, okay, take away their earnings, what they earn from their investments, and that will give you that net debt there. But you're throwing these two here together, and you're starting to see these rise fairly significantly over the estimates there. And this is just what brings it all, everything there together. I'm just throwing that in there so you can share these slides on your side if you like, if anyone wants to go over it and everything. So here's your borrowings with Queensland Treasury Corporation, because they borrow on behalf of the government. Okay, so that's your general government, and then you come down here in non-public financial sector, so that's their borrowings there, so along there, and that's how we come at those numbers.
Well, they seem to be happy with doubling the debt in what's that, 8 years.
Yes, significantly. So, and I mean that's the thing. We're going to need productive industry. So I'll just let's go from there. So I'll stop the share. Yeah, well, I mean we're going to need productive industries, and we talked about the hydrogen. I don't think that's going to replace these traditional coal and gas significantly. The red tape, we just can't get the projects up anymore in those areas. And there's Queensland has got a lot of projects in the DISA major projects pipeline. But we've got a lot of opposition to those, obviously, from Central Queensland conservation mob in particular, trying to get the federal environment minister to knock them back. 19 projects were on the hit list. So they got one down. That was Clyde's Central Queensland mine, but lucky Bowen Coke and Coal got up, so we got one got up. But we're going to need to see them sort of all those projects start to come online if we're going to go forward.
But the other thing we need is actually value-adding industries. If we don't, we can keep digging holes and getting stuff out of the ground. I mean, we do that pretty well over in West Australia and with the iron ore and Queensland with the coal. But until we actually bite the bullet and say, well, we're actually got to get steel making back on the road, and aluminium smelting instead of just sending out bauxite. But the big problem is going to be affordable, reliable electricity. And we seem to be, our government seems hell-bent on destroying any possibility for high energy intensive industries.
It certainly is. And then you've got the carbon tax that they've just put on as well, particularly for aluminium. I mean, it's if you want to value add and refining capacities and everything. I mean, as the thing, you need cheap energy, and 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 don't go throwing all these taxes on them. That's it's simple as that. But Labor can't help themselves.
But the other thing is too, I mean, while they're thinking about, we'll knock these things back because of CO2 and that, they don't seem to understand that these things are just going to happen elsewhere. In the short term, they'll be using our coal, our iron ore in China and India to make the steel and emit the CO2. And also, it's also in areas where the regulations aren't that good in regards to health standards and clean air environment. You think they just wake up and say, well, maybe we should at least do some manufacturing of steel here.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly. I mean, that's the whole thing. They seem to think that they live in a bubble here. That that it's a zero-sum game. So if we don't, as we talked about it before, if we don't produce it, and someone else will, and whether it be Russia or the US, plenty of places with coal. It's not rare. It's just we've got great quality coal, and we typically had. Well, until the last few years, we've been, a trade destination of in favour because we've seen it very low sovereign risk, but the government just seems hell bent on destroying that reputation, and it's not going to end well.
No, just looking at the overall budget, I mean, just as your experience as an economist and that. Is there anything, if you had some input into the government, could say, well, you've got to do this. What's some of the things you might sort of look at in regards to getting us on track and make sure we are getting A, value for money, and B, not going to spiral into this debt? What areas do we need to look at?
Well, I mean, red tape's the biggest issue. The red and the green tape. I mean, that's been hampering us for years, which is slowed the economy down significantly. If it hadn't been for the massive population growth,
the Ponzi scheme.
The Ponzi scheme, yeah, or our housing sector.
Population Ponzi scheme.
Our overpriced housing sector, Ponzi scheme. If it hadn't been for that, it's the red tape's probably the biggest issue, the red and the green tape, and obviously across the programs and everything we need the cost blowouts. It's not just in our state, it's all over Australia, and just a redundancy in all the departments, and it's anyone that works, there's too many bureaucrats and everything in government, far too many.
Well, I mean, a lot of people say, well, there's too many levels of government. Well, there's only 2 levels of government for a start. Local government, as people call it, is just an arm of the various state governments that have been given some authority and responsibilities without the appropriate funding to do jobs. and the suckers, this is how bad they are. If the government offered up to, you can take this over, this responsibility, they'd jump at it, but then they'd wake up and say, well, where's the money to do it? But they're that slow, they just think the prestige of, well, we're now going to do this and that. The other thing is too, I mean, we've got a federal government that's got an education department but doesn't run a school, but it's got about 4,000 public servants. I mean, it's also the fact that the Federation, the way it was set up, has been corrupted by the Commonwealth having basically all the revenue, whereas when the Constitution and the Federation first started, state governments had income tax collection, and the feds were responsible for excise and things like that. And the other thing is that feds only had a certain number of things to look at. They never had education. They never had law and order. They never had health. But over the years, with their revenue power and sort of coercion of the states, well, if you implement this in the health regime, well, we'll give you this bit of money. If you implement NAT plan and all these Indigenous studies in your curriculum, we'll give you this money. So it's the separation of power that was there has basically been corrupted a fair bit. And now you've got this, like you say, duplicity of the state and federal government seemingly doing the same thing and just adding to the woes of everyone.
Yeah, and we spoke, about the problems with that vertical fiscal equalisation, where, essentially it used to be about, the states used to have to compete for have their own industries and compete. But these days there's that perverse incentive that, the more productive you are,
you get penalised.
You get penalised in grants. So,
but that's the thing. I mean, a lot of people don't understand about the way the GST distribution is. I mean, I've always been an advocate that no state should get less than 95% of its GST revenue. This bullshit of bloody knocking someone down to 85%, or like West Australia got knocked down to 30% of its GST. And Tasmania gets $1.70 or something, and so Tasmania sits there, collects all this money, closes down its logging industry, makes sure a paper mill, a new technology paper mill, doesn't get built, closes down every bit of mining, so it actually doesn't have any industry, and it doesn't earn anything, and has a situation where 70% of the people employed, either employed by local government, federal government, state government, or are contracted to do one of those three. 70% of your working population. How can you actually run an economy on that? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. It's been, as I said, it's been an issue for as long as I was in my university days. So, and I'm sure it'll be a matter of contention for a long time to go. So, but maybe the football stadium will help.
Football stadium. Yeah, build a coliseum for plebs. Take their mind off.
That's right.
Feed a few Christians to the lions, and they'll forget that they're overtaxed and Rome's burning. It really is.
How was the footy on Friday night? don't look there. Look here.
I mean, in Cairns, if they're not talking about a new rugby stadium or getting a license for a rugby team or getting a license for a team, but there's nothing there about let's get a decent road over the Coranda Range so we can open that place economically and move away from just sheer tourism and that. They just feed the plebs this garbage, and the trouble is, the plebs and the leaders of the plebs up here either don't know any better or they're just happy with the status quo.
Well, as you can see, the money's not coming from thin air. It's been borrowed. so you're leaving it to your kids, to our kids. So there's no Labor magic pudding.
I can see sometimes where the young people might be getting a bit gripey in that once they start to realise the amount of debts that's been left to them, and they sort of get a bit cranky at the old boomer generation, the baby boomers.
Yeah, haven't they?
Although a lot of them can't even add up yet, so it doesn't really matter.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, we've done the hour and that, so we'll just have a bit of a wind up in regards to What you is the picture is, I mean, I look at those numbers and I just roll my eyes in regards to moving up from, $130 billion of debt to $227 billion of debt over the next few years or whatever. And it sort of worries me, but does it really worry governments, or should it worry people, or what? I mean, it's as though it's like debt's the last thing people are governments are thinking about. And that opportunity, we got $14 billion. If we had to just put that on the debt, would have that sort of at least slowed things down a little bit?
No, oh, certainly. But I mean, there's always been that for government to come to the assistance. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the interest rates are going up, but we're old enough to know that there's business cycles. There's good times and there's bad times. That's how economies work. How they renew themselves and everything. All the assistance and everything. All it's going to do is push interest rates up, and people need to understand that. And when governments tell you that them spending money is not going to cause inflation, that's absolutely ridiculous. It does. How much inflation is obviously the argument, but for my calculations from the federal government, if you look at historically, every 1% increase in government spending is a 0.35% increase in inflation. So you're looking at that, and you want it to be a relative level between 2 and 3. So when the 5% increase is what's about 1.6 or something percent inflation there. That's before any of the other inflation within the economy, and from the natural rate. So governments do have to control their spending, because they're still growing at a significant amount. And the other issue is that because the actual level of spending is a larger proportion of GDP now. Like federally, Commonwealth government debt spending used to only be 20% of GDP. Now it's almost 30%. So it's a much larger part of the economy. So the increase in spending has a very larger impact on inflation. So
it's like they want everyone to be dependent on the government somewhere along the line as we move along. And
yeah,
I mean, this thing of providing $500 rebate on electricity charges for a good portion of the Queensland population. It will be everyone on a seniors card or whatever, and there's probably other ones that fall within that group. But that just goes to show how much they're prepared to mask the problem of their policies for a crap energy policy that's driving up prices. If people had to experience the real pain of those energy prices, they might hold the government to account. But when they're using other people's money to soften the blow to a good portion of the population, it does sort of counter that bad policy.
Exactly. And I mean, as you were talking to, it just comes into show. It's the spin, and that's all these budgets have been. They've just been spin. And as far as the capital expenditure spending and everything, they're just re-announcements. I mean, I've been hearing these things and money put into them they're just re-announcements. It just keeps rolling on. And by the time we get to actually, the projects coming to fruition, they're going to be costing a lot more than what they budgeted for. So it's very
that's one of the things I was talking about with Steve Andrew from Marani, an MP from there, and he was sort of indicating that a lot of the projects that have been announced, the amount of money compared to the overall cost that they're dribbling in each year is just fractional. And it's like, well, how long are you going to make this project go? It's something that's like a road or a ring road is something you should get in and get done in a couple of years, not give it's a $400 million project, and this year we'll give it $21 million. You know, like that 21 million is going to go up in inflation over the next few years, disappear, and so you'll only get a few inches of new road done. So
that's exactly right.
It staggers me, but they stand up there and they tell us how well they're doing things for everyone with all these unlimited number of projects. But yeah, it's an unlimited number of projects, but we're only going to give a tiny bit of money here and it will be over the next 4 to 10 years or whatever. Like, stop blowing your trumpet for nothing.
Yeah,
they've got plenty of hot air.
Pipelines, more like pipe dreams.
The other thing is too, the disappointing thing with the budget and the money that came in, the revenue that came in. There's no wealth creation project that's going to grow the pie. I mean, I think that's something that's been seriously missed in this conversation in regards to all this extra money is coming in from coal. It's going to be there at a reasonable rate for the next few years, but there's no infrastructure projects in regional Queensland that are going to really grow the pie for anyone. It's all just, let's patch up a few roads and add another couple of kilometres to the Bruce Highway.
But what hasn't the funding been cut? Bruce Highway?
Probably for one area, but there's probably given money to it. I mean, it's a long stretch of road. I mean,
yeah.
There's a project, I think the part of the project's in Rockhampton, there's part in Mackay, there's a bit in Townsville. We've just had our upgrade just south of Cairns. So it's just like it's a big jigsaw puzzle, a mishmash of stuff, like there's no, imagine if the Chinese did things our way with their high-speed rail, like they build a bit of a track between nowhere and nowhere, and then we haven't got any trains yet, and we just
got a whole new city and no one living in
it. we seem to be so bad
in 6 months.
Anyway, look, we enjoyed the time tonight. If you can stay on the line for a little bit, I'll introduce the next episode of Regional Wrap, and we'll just have a little chat after.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Marcus. Really appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
If you've enjoyed tonight's show, please like, share, and subscribe to our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Next Thursday, I'll have another episode. This episode will be with the Mayor of Yarrabah, and we'll be talking on their aspirations and needs. Now, it's a strange community or a unique community in the fact of Indigenous communities. It actually is right next door to a major Queensland city. If you're in Cairns CBD on the foreshore, you can see over the Trinity Inlet to Yarrabah. It's not far. It's a little boat ride across the Trinity Creek. A lot of people call it a bay. It's not. It's a creek. But if you want to drive there, it's a 60-kilometre road trip. So they're the sort of frustrations with a community that's so close yet so far and needs upgrades in its infrastructure. So we'll be talking to the Mayor of Yarrabah on Thursday night. Please join us then. Thank you.